Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brent. I'm the host for Canadians with Disabilities and Their Allies. And today we have Anthony Frisina joining us today, talking about the disability inclusion revolution.
Hey, good afternoon, Brent. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good now. How are you guys?
I'm wonderful. How are you doing, Anthony?
Doing well, doing well. Thank you so much for having me on your stage tonight. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, this is great. It's always a pleasure having wonderful guests like yourself on and talking about the important issues regarding people with disabilities across Canada and beyond, right? And it affects everybody's lives in so many ways, and it's a privilege to have you on. I mean, it's awesome. Like, thank you so much, Anthony, for taking the time today to come on to the show.
Thank you, Brent, and it's absolutely my pleasure. Disability is the largest minority group worldwide, and disability is the only demographic with a fluctuation rate. As we talked about in previous opportunities together, disability can happen to anyone at any time, so it's important that we maintain a proactive approach rather than reactive. And we'll get there with the allies that we build together.
Absolutely. You know, it takes a lot of armies to build up, and we are on the right track of making a change to make people's lives so much better in so many ways, of bringing all the inequalities that have been put on to Canadians with disabilities. I mean, people's lived experiences, right? I mean, they know what they go through on a day-to-day basis, and with government's legislated poverty, it really has a detrimental effect on their mental health, their physical health, just their well-being in general, right? And it can change, right? It definitely when it has to change. It's not even an if, right? It has to change in a positive way.
Absolutely, it certainly has to change. The disability community deserves a lot better treatment that we are getting from governments, not only in Ontario, in Canada, and worldwide. You know, often I'm reminded of the fact that when something isn't deemed accessible, the underlining message is, you don't belong here. And that's the stereotype and the stigma that we really need to alleviate. When we think proactively in building accessibility and inclusion, not only tangibly, but intangibly as well, alleviating the attitudinal barriers, amplifying education behind it, amplifying the fact that when cost of living goes up, and the inflation goes up, that so should ODSP. ODSP right now is well below the poverty line here in Ontario at 14,058, where poverty is listed at 24,058 as well. What needs to change is we need to rally our governments, we need to rally our allies, and we need to rally one another and those without the disability and those outside of the disability platform to ensure that we create that environment where we all belong. It's about creating and amplifying the equity behind it.
There's so many people that don't have disabilities also, but they can become disabled at any point in time in their life. Like stats show, 1 in 5 people will have a disability sometime in their life, either born with it or they will develop a form of a disability. It may not be physical, it may be invisible. And those are definitely stats that are quite alarming, really, because with the cost of living going up with inflation, basically it creates more of a barrier for people with disabilities of buying the necessities in life. If they have adaptive equipment that they need to support their disability, being able to go to a grocery store and buy the fresh vegetables and all the products that they need on a limited budget, it creates more of a problem. I mean, it's a crisis that's evolving, and with the federal government and the provincial governments across Canada not keeping up with the rates on a per person every month up to the standard of living and beyond, and it shouldn't be just at the standard of living. It needs to be beyond that, right? Because all the extra expenditures that come along with it. I mean, someone wants to go to a food bank, well, that's, really, in some cases it may work for some people, and other people it doesn't work for. And that kind of goes with accessibility also again, right? Anthony, it doesn't always work for people, and they shouldn't really have to choose a food bank. I mean, If it works for them, great. If it doesn't, it shouldn't be a one all on that one, right? You should be having a standard of income that's going to support their needs, that they need to make that decision for themselves, because lived experience, again, so many things that have to change in so many ways. And on how to get to that is a campaign, obviously, that I think we'll have to work on going forward to make society realize that Canadians with disabilities are citizens in the country too. And if you give people enough money and the resources that they need, then definitely they can thrive and be more inclusive in the communities that they live in. So they can actually support the small businesses that they need to thrive too, rather than big corporations, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also about uplifting infrastructure, economy, transportation, quality of life. That should be something that, as people with disabilities, we should also be able to govern over. And when you are equipped, let's say, with $11.69 a month in Ontario, that really puts you at a deficit, for example. Now, you're more often than not choosing between food, water, shelter, clothing on your backs on a month-by-month basis, and that's really unacceptable. The federal government set the precedence by stating for those who are unable to work because of the pandemic were deemed eligible for $2,000 a month. Where is that equity in place to people with disabilities? Not to mention, furthermore, people with disabilities, our expenses are higher. And as you alluded to at the beginning, Brent, we're legislated into poverty through no choice of our own. We are just being held back against our will due to the fact that we're not given the same opportunities. It's the difference between shopping at a grocery store versus having to go to a food bank. Mental health is being diminished. Quality of life is being diminished. It's atrocious the way society perceives people with disabilities. And I think it's important that we understand that your perception is not my reality. And as people with disabilities, we all have different needs, different perspectives. And it's not a one-size-fits-all model that people with disabilities are often categorized in. We need to look past the surface level and really, really take a added focus or added attention to our individual needs and be more focused on solutions rather than problems.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you on that. And the top billionaires, they've made major billions of profits during the pandemic, and people with disabilities, they got zero, right? In most cases, I mean, in some small little tokens they got thrown at them, but doesn't even meet the cost of living. Inflation has gone up to a record high, and I'll get to that part in a few minutes. But regarding the inflation part, but yeah, like these the top billionaires, they're not paying their taxes in the country, right? It's a trickle down effect. So they pay their taxes, and that can increase the healthcare transfer fees that the provinces desperately need going across. And of course, with that, then that puts less strain on the healthcare system, because people with disabilities, if they don't, as you mentioned, Anthony, if they don't get the proper nutrition, right, the proper means, then they're going to put more strain on the healthcare system. It costs society so much more to keep people in poverty than to lift them out of poverty. And the government knows that. And I just don't understand why they do that. But getting back to the topic of about inflation that I was just mentioning, Stats Can for the month of May, came out with 7.7 national average. Of course, as we know, inflation is a lot higher than 7.7%. The goods and services are way higher. I mean, everything's doubled, like $2-3 more on every item, you name it. And of course, that was an increase from 6.8% in April. And of course, rent prices are through the roof. Everything, you name it, has gone up, but our incomes have not. So there's a huge problem. Now, of course, the federal government has now just rose for the summer, go on their 3-month vacation time. and haven't passed the Canada Disability Benefit. I mean, they didn't even put it through the second reading, let alone put a emergency interim amount in the meantime to help people, right? They say they want to do a study on that program. They don't need to do a study, right? A basic income is basically the way to go for sure. What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. A basic income is the way to go to legislate people out of poverty. And I think it's important that we understand that, first and foremost, we're all people too, and we have the different needs. And giving people the opportunity to thrive is what basic income will do. And when you put all persons in positions to succeed, whether they're employed or not, whether they're able to be more active in the economy by having more buying power and spending power, that money recycles itself within the economy itself. So I can't see it as nothing but being a benefit to the society as a whole. You give people with disabilities more autonomy, more agency, more dignity, more respect, more independence, and the ability to self-govern. That is nothing but a positive to all of us in the community, whether you have a disability or not.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, people have a lived experience. They know what they go through, and to lift them out of poverty is to give them the actual means that they need to thrive. I mean, they put the resources back into the economy, into the economy, the community that they live in. They can then travel freely with a basic income. They'd be able to travel freely throughout every province without permission of saying, can I pretty please leave the province for over 30 days so I can go and visit a relative, a friend. Maybe they want to move to another province, right? Because right now, as the programs are designed, and they're designed to basically suppress people down, more control. That has to change also, and that's something that we'll have to get worked on to do that, put pressure on the governments. But with a basic income, people will be able to do that. They'll be able to go anywhere in Canada. They're a Canadian citizen. They should be able to go to any province and not prove why they need that income in another province. Under a basic income, they don't have to do that. Under basically government control, they have to basically apply for PWD status under another province. And I mean, once you're disabled, you're disabled. You don't have to, you don't have to, and you shouldn't have to prove that, right?
That's so condescending and demoralizing and dehumanizing when people believe that you have to prove disability. It speaks volumes to the fact that, there's just this underlining nature of the respect that people with disabilities get. It's really unfortunate that we essentially have to break through our own barriers toward equity. It's demoralizing for me, at least, and it's condescending to the fact that we need to break down through these additional barriers that not only society gives us, but the attitudes in society. I know, at least for me, my action recently is now running for city council here in Hamilton to be part of the solution. I always like to say that in life there are no problems, only solutions waiting to be found. It's one thing to be listened to and heard, but it's another thing for action and demonstration to take place. When listening and hearing only goes so far.